We want to welcome everyone watching this program, both live as I speak and on replay. Thank you for joining us. This is the Rare Book Cafe, the first internet video program in the entire world about antiquarian books. I'm your host, Steve the Bookman Eisenstein. Today is our third show on our new home, Google Hangouts on air. We're also available now on replay at Rare Book Cafe on Facebook, on YouTube, and at Florida at blogspot.com, home of our sponsor, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. My co-hosts from version 1.0 are all back with me, my good friend Thorne Donnelley of Liberty Books and Lindsay Thompson of Henry Bemis Books in North Carolina. Our creator is executive producer Allan Smith, and he is backstage flicking switches and twisting knobs in a control room. Our guest today is Florida book dealer Kara Accettola. Later in the program, we'll have Edie's Miniature Corner, starring my wife Edie, and also our Hidden Treasures feature. If you love unusual books, you won't want to miss this. We'll also have a mix of our recurring features, including The Third Degree, The Burning Question, Professor Donnelley's Collector's Class, and The Big Idea later in the program. You can send us questions and comments through the contact features of YouTube, Facebook, and Blogger. Whichever you are seeing us through, we'll be watching and responding on today's and future shows too. If you are new to the program and want to be alerted about other episodes of Rare Book Cafe, be sure to like and follow the show on Facebook and share it with your friends. And if you are listening to any other devices in the room, turn down the volume. Gentlemen, what's been going on in the wonderful world of rare books this week? Thorne, Lindsay?
Well, for me, it's been kind of fun. As you know, I have a retail bookstore, and so this is the week before Christmas. We sell lots of books. But in the spirit of Scrooge, I guess, literally as I was walking in here, I sold a set of Washington Irving. It's a 4-volume set of Washington Irving. Very nice, not a big deal. Except within a minute after the Biblio order came through, I received a letter, an email from the customer asking me to please make sure, even though she said, even though I know you have no control about the U.S. mails, but please make sure this goes out as soon as possible because it's going to be my son's major Christmas present for this year. So the pressure's on me. It's a 4-volume set. No, she didn't pay for next day. No, she didn't pay for anything more than media mail. So we will get it out today. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, folks, in case you haven't noticed, they had that 12 days of Christmas and how many days of shopping and all that, and the Saturday before Christmas Eve. We will get it out for her, but I am not Amazon. We will do our very best. So that's my little Christmas rant, but everything else has been pretty good. So how's everything with you guys? Lindsay, how's it going?
Well, we've had a busy week, and the big news in the book world, of course, was that it was my birthday, so we took Tuesday off. And I always willing to pour myself out for an angle to sell something. I did some research and discovered a list of the New York Times bestsellers for the week I was born in 1955.
Oh,
and
wow.
That I, in fact, have the number one and number two bestsellers that week. The number one bestseller, which had been on for 13 weeks, was Herman Wouk's Marjorie Morningstar.
Very good.
He was pretty much at the heyday of his career at that point. He had won the Caine Mutiny Pulitzer in 1951. He is still alive. He will be 102 next spring, and just published a memoir for his 100th birthday. Then number two was Andersonville, McKinley Cantor's novel about the notorious Civil War prison, which won the 1956 Pulitzer Prize. And Cantor was more or less the opposite of Wouk in that he wrote this one great book and a few others that pretty much vanished without a trace and died in 1977. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that those were the things people were reading in lieu of taking note of my birth 61 years ago. I will also note that I am today wearing my newly issued bow tie. I have been commissioned an officer in the North Carolina Resistance.
Yeah.
Very good.
You brought back memories mentioning Marjorie Morningstar. There's a scene there that was written in the Hotel Tamament where I was the entertainment director for a couple of seasons.
Oh, wow, really? Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I wondered about that scene with the guy telling jokes about A.B. Bookman's Weekly.
Well, yeah, made me wonder if any. I never thought about it till now. When we dove in the lake was history rich, and we found a lot of jewelry there. But at that time, I wasn't aware. Maybe one of those pieces was Herman Woukes, but just joking. For me in the rare book world, I've just been really busy with this appraisal, which is going to occupy a lot of time right now. To be probably close to 100 hours of appraisal time, and it's a major collection of Cuban memorabilia. And the interesting part about that is I'm willing to bet that in Florida, anyone who was ever a dealer, past, present, sold him a collection, sold something to Ramiro Casanas at the book fair. If you were doing Florida book fairs about 20 years ago, he was the guy that walked into the booth with a couple of other people and bought anything and everything he didn't have in his collection in Cuba. So it's going to be interesting. I'm also going to video it as I go. For a combination of two things, the history aspect of it, because some of the things in this collection are just absolutely unique, and also just to do a little teaching process about the appraisal methodology. So that's been kind of what's been going on. Haven't had a chance to actually miss the library sale this week.
Well, speaking of sales, I should mention that I had a visit this week from a friend of all of you, George Spiro, who has been a regular dealer at the FABA show for years. He has retired to North Carolina, lives on the other side of Charlotte, and was referred to me by Jerry Morris of the Florida Bibliophiles. He came over and we had a very nice chat, and he thinks he may yet show up for next year's FABA show because he's got a storage room full of books to get rid of.
Well, that'll be great, especially if they haven't been seen in a while. I'm looking at our schedule, and has anybody got anything else any other good finds or potential things happening? We're thrilled to have Florida bookseller Kara Accettola join us today on Rare Book Cafe. Kara's interests include books and ephemera on women, non-elitist narratives, art, social history, and culture. A new microcatalog project began this year with selected thematic gatherings in digital and printed form. She also has experience working intensively with letters, rare books, photographic archives, prints and ephemera, posters, broadsides, diaries, letters, journals, pamphlets, handmade items in many languages relating to women, art, culture, American and social history. Kara, thanks for joining us today. Kara, the opening question is what got you started in the wonderful world of rare books?
So I didn't hear the whole question. You skipped out.
What got you started in the wonderful world of rare books?
Oh, this is a tricky question. Every time someone asks it, I think that I always, my most truthful answer is that I didn't find that world found me. I don't know where in the narrative of my life it really happened. I always had a book in my hand. Even if I wasn't reading it, I was just enjoying it as an object. I had a mother that always kind of sentimentalized things that were lovely, and probably only about as far back as the 19th century, because that's what's around for regular people, and especially in Florida. But she always had something turn of the century that she would give me as a little gift, and I think that that was part of what set the seeds. I was not a literature major. I'm not a huge reader. That's the question we all get, right? Is, did you read all these? I mean, I read constantly. I'm an absorber and an aggregator of information for sure, but I am not someone who is, you know, I'm not a couple chapters a day fiction reader by any stretch. But the world excites me, which is why I think I kind of specialize in nonfiction, in a lot of ologies, and not to so much the typical book world when we think of, you know, 20th century and 19th century fiction. But I do remember buying a copy of, ironically, fiction at a library sale. My kids were really little, and I was just poking around a library sale because you could get reading things and things for them and stuff for you and CDs. And I bought an On Her Majesty's Service. And it was not a first printing, but it was something decent enough that I think I must have sold it on eBay. I had just a typical like buy and sell account, and boom, I think that probably was the very, very first tiny little seed. And that's kind of the origin story.
And from there, it became a passion and a hobby.
Yes.
What made you lean towards the specialty area that you're involved with?
Oh, Steve, I'm sorry. Your audio is kind of go-obby, but I think you probably asked what made me focus on what I'm involved in now, maybe?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Before you go there, am I breaking up everywhere?
No, I
Audio?
can hear you. I can hear you.
Go ahead,
It's
Karen.
watery on some parts of your questions. It goes under watery. I don't know why. But I'll just try to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
You speak sign language?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I was just selling, you know, I was an opportunist in the sense that, you know, you do have to be a generalist at first. You just sell what you can get your hands on. And I really did believe in the adage, handle everything possible. I knew starting completely organically, completely green, that I just needed to handle, you know, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 things, whether it was just touching it to say no or flipping through boxes. So I was an eager generalist. And then I realized a little bit what I'm naturally drawn to, which was art and culture and things that were visual. And somewhere in that pathway, in between going to CABS, Colorado Antiquarian Book Seminar or Book School, said, Carrie, you've got to kind of pick a specialization, which I kind of joke is sometimes the anathema of success, because rather than only dealing in one thing, specialization really means that you become just more versed in an area so that you can speak with depth in an area, but not let go of the reins of all of the generalist areas and that generalist train that keeps a small firm going. So still a total generalist, but I realized that what I cared about was people and people's stories and history. It clicked to me that women and minorities and an oppressed voice was actually Americana. I sometimes call it the other Americana, that's where I get that non-elitist canon thing, which I realize is a little, I don't know if it's presumptuous, but I just call it that. And so it's alternative voices, which are also, of course, mainstream voices. It's just voices that maybe hasn't always been given the same light that the general canon has. Your turn.
I like the word non-elitist. When you started, what were you using for reference? Were you American Book Pricing Current, or were you on computer?
I was on computer. Yeah, I never had a BPC. I think I paid for, back in the day, I was paying for Terapeak, which was just general research on eBay, but it still gave some depth. I didn't know anything about, at that point, Americana Exchange Rare Book Hub, and I didn't know, you know, some of the other newer paid for data sites that are in the art world. Basically, digital's kind of subscriptions, and then I realized really fast that a physical reference book was a lot of everything.
Did you ever subscribe to the AB in the last few years?
AB Bookman?
Yes.
No, I think it was already gone before me. I mean, my very first tiny little sputters of buying something at a library sale and flipping it online or flipping it to somebody who was a bigger kind of a dealer was 2007. So I don't know what the landscape exactly looked like then, but that was my very beginnings of looking at the world.
I'm just welcoming, is that Cynthia that I see there?
Yes.
Hi,
Welcome,
Cynthia.
welcome. Thorne or Lindsay, do you have any questions for Kara?
Well, one thing I'm curious, well, really, I guess two parts to how you decide what is a minority voice you want to find things in or focus on. And more broadly, do you think that the demand for that general area will go up or down in the next few years, given that they seem to be pretty significantly on the outs in the view of the incoming administration?
Such a good question. Oh, Lindsay, I just want to talk to you for like forever. I think up, possibly not in a linear way, but I'm going to say definitely up. We were almost at a tipping point where we were going to start. I think we were already at a tipping point with special collections. Everybody kind of knows that the typical canon, the white male canon of material, is kind of filled up the shelves already, and we are only looking at more granular minority voices, or not even really minorities anymore, just the full spectrum of voice. And so I think it will only increase as our landscape continues to become more representative. So up. I mean, I'm certainly not one of the biggest players in that genre, but I think that the folks that have positioned themselves really well for the future of the trade. Absolutely. I mean, then again, that's not to say that what happened this week in my book news of what I thought was really kind of crazy this week, since you guys do that segment at the beginning, is the $3.4 million Christie's sale for Principia in a fine binding. So, if we talk about non-elitist, that's not to be pejorative towards things that are of consequence, that are part of our printing history and part of what makes us who we are and has made us who we are as a civilization, and the high points of disciplines and the high points of great learning and great things and great ideas. It's those things are still fabulous. So just wanted
part of the reason that I asked, and part of the reason I pulled out those two books from the 50s is with all this new emphasis on going back to that time, I have a sense that Thomas B. Costain is going to start going through the roof, and all those old 1950s authors.
I'm not arguing with you. It kind of like if you go like extremely fast forward and think about a Star Trek episode where I think Kirk had the only book in a galaxy or universe. Time is, what is it that's going to make somebody like Costain? When we would walk into a thrift shop or we would go into a store and we would see the books, it's not something you're going to buy to resell. But eventually, will people run out of things and start going to that as time catches going forward?
Yeah. So I guess one more thing, I guess, for me to add to that is whether or not different segments, see increase or see traction in the market in the near future. I don't know for sure. But what I do think is that people are going to be more hungry for information than ever. And some of the sources that we now in the last decade have taken for granted that will feed us, the narratives that are true or the narratives that we're at least somewhat comfortable with, those are all kind of being somewhat challenged. And I think that readership and exploration of data in alternative media is alternative here actually being the physicality of print media, or looking back at newspapers from certain generations or certain centuries. I think that they will I always believe in a renaissance, and I always believe in the the resurgence of the actual materiality of print and of those readable objects. And I think that will only grow when you can't trust 1 or 7 layers of digital sources. You can trust microfiche. And a step beyond that is going to someplace to have it in your hands. I say paper doesn't lie. paper tells the truth, which is why I like letters and things that actually only have one filter between the original human that was creating that and it being in my hand. There's not much in between it. And so there's not as much room for misinterpretation, retranslation, or lies.
Lindsay?
I agree with all of that. I think the other thing that will probably drive interest in ephemera and some of the other fugitive materials and less well-known authors due for a rediscovery will be that certainly I've seen a few times already in my life that the best way to get people to read things is to tell them they can't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for sure, people are going to get more fired up and become more organic seekers. That will definitely happen.
So we're all going to be rich.
Yeah, they're gonna buy old books because they're, yeah.
They're reliable.
Yeah.
And they have dust jackets in fine condition. Cynthia, I see you published the calendar of rare book events, correct?
Just book fairs.
Book fairs.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell, for the sake of people that will see this in the future, if you are looking to find the date of an antiquarian book fair, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is held April 21st to 23rd in St. Petersburg. But if you are seeing this program somewhere else out of the Florida region and you are looking to find where events are going on in your area, Cynthia, tell us about what you have at bookfairs.com.
Well, it is what it says it is. It's a listing of antiquarian book fairs, and it's updated. It's as accurate as it can be to the moment based on what local book fair organizers are putting out on the internet or telling me directly. So yeah, at any given time right now, it's got every book fair happening across the country starting January. I believe the first weekend in January. It's already up and running. We've got the entire, I don't think there's a weekend between the beginning of January and the middle of April when there isn't a book fair happening somewhere in the continental United States and or Canada.
And if you are new to books and you're not aware of it, it's bookfairs.com. There's a regional or larger book fair in your area. Checking out book fairs make a great place for learning, and you'll meet other people with similar interests.
I'd like to.
Let me just add, as Kara was saying, nothing beats getting your hands on the material, and you can actually do that, especially at the smaller, more regional book fairs. Some of the larger ones are all about class cases and really expensive material, but the smaller regional fairs are very much about individual dealers who are happy to get to know you and happy to hand you their material to hold in your own hand and to talk to you about it and explain why they're so enthusiastic and excited about it. And so, yeah, if you want to learn about this stuff, do not be daunted. There is nothing scary about a regional book fair.
And sometimes they have seminars on different specialties or generalities going on. So by all means, check it out at bookfairs.com.
Question, didn't he?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I thought Cynthia, glad to see you here, answered a question that nobody asked her when she said that there's a regional book fair almost every weekend. And people keep asking me, I have a retail store, which is the other side of this wall here. People say, well, wow, are the people still buying books? Are rare books still happening and all that? If there's a regional book fair, as many, if you go to Cynthia's website, there are a bunch of them. And it just shows me, at least I know our particular one, the FABA one, is growing. We've added more dealers. There's more people. I was up in Boston. I was told that there was their volume was much higher there. People seem to like books. I used to teach information technology at Palm Beach Atlantic University here, and there was a while there when the ebooks came out. My God, there was this penetration for children's books that I think got like 20-25% of children's books were for about 1 month being sold on ebooks. So everybody figured out that you don't want to give little Dickie a $600 iPad to watch him drop it. And the other thing was that it just the mothers and the grandparents, all want their child to actually read a book, to hold a book. So I mean, we have a whole new generation of people coming in. My children's, I do antiquarian and youth stuff. My children's section is far and away the most heavily trafficked, and it's the kids love it, the parents love it, everybody walks in. I feel, at my age, 65, I'm not too concerned about being confident for the future. But for you youngins, the Cynthias and Karas out there, I think the business is going to, it keeps going and going and going. So I just wanted to welcome Cynthia and say that I love the fact I do look at her website to see what's there. And it seems to me you've been adding, I don't know whether it's just, as you've got more experience, you're adding sites, you're adding fairs. I don't know whether they're new to the business or just new to you, but you keep adding stuff. I know that.
I keep adding stuff. I've expanded to include some paper and postcard fairs as well, especially on the West Coast. And also, I now have an auction page, so that's will get you, if you're looking to get into more expensive books, getting to know the auction houses. And I should just say, it's not just that there's a book fair every weekend. I think we're up to 120 some odd fairs listed, and those are annual fairs. So this is, depending on where you are in the country, there are 2 or 3 book fairs happening every weekend. So
all this information used to be available in 4 books with bright yellow covers, regionally dividing the country into book sale regions.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
I know Steve is keen to move on to quizzing our guest, but I think we would miss a bet here if we didn't ask both Cynthia and Kara, what, if anything, are you hearing about AB 1570, the California authentication bill that goes into effect January 1st? Stephen had a guest on his show a few weeks ago who gave us a sense of the backroom machinations of trying to sort out whether that impacts all of us. But there's nothing has come out since then to indicate that it does not scoop us all up. And as a matter of fact, I read an article last night in which Abe and Amazon and eBay and all the big dealers or aggregators are saying, well, we tell our dealers to follow the law. So what are you hearing from all the people you talk to?
I haven't heard anything this week, but I've been following on some of my listservs and channels like you, Lindsay, some of those backroom what's happening. I mean, my latest update was just that some of the larger organized bodies like Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America or other, national or international kind of groups are consulting their counsel to see what we should do to protect ourselves if in the meantime. I'm not exhibiting in Oakland this year. I'm visiting, and so that would be a really interesting litmus test for what's actually happening on the ground. It's kind of the wild, wild west. I'm not sure. I think there'll be a correction because it was pretty clear, like there was a California law a couple decades ago that accidentally scooped antique stores and dealers into some kind of a protective pawn shop, arc. I think there'll be a correction eventually, but it doesn't mean there won't be casualties in the meantime. What have you heard? Cynthia, your ear might be closer to the ground on that.
No, I think I'm hearing pretty much what you're hearing. I would say I think that from some deeper reading that I've done on it, it does seem like there are at least a couple of members of the California legislature who are kind of paying attention to this and are aware that there's a problem and are going to try and introduce some legislature.
Let me add a couple of things because I was talking to somebody about it last night. Alex Novak is a noted photography dealer.
Love him. He's great.
Yes. Yeah, info at vintageworks.com. So I wrote a note to Bruce McKinney when I was reading about the Heritage and Christie's thing because I was okay, but going back to this, when I mentioned this law to Alex, 1570, he did not know about it, and he's doing a show in California. So, Lindsay, in answer to the question is, I would say that there's concern. You know, the is concern. What I remember, I'm trying to remember if I can remember whose name it was. It was Mark
Kurtz.
Yeah, he told us that there was a key legislator that was moving up in position, and she was trying to help take the wrinkles out of this.
Yeah,
So,
that was Ling Ling Chang, who
yes,
introduced this as a bit of feel-good legislation to help get into the state Senate, which she has now done.
Right.
And she has since then told us all that it's obvious on its face that the law does not apply to booksellers, because she says booksellers deal in collectibles like autographed books only in the sense that a convenience store might sell paperbacks, and that it's plain on the face of her law. Well, in my previous life, I interpreted laws for a living, and this law is plain on its face. It applies to everybody who deals in or out of California. If you're an online seller with Amazon or eBay, you can say to a seller, I regret that I'm not dealing in California for now, and they can go bitch you out to eBay or Amazon and cause problems for you in that way. And the piece that I think, to your point, Steve, has escaped everyone in these pious expressions of concern is the problem is not so much for what we as dealers think of it, it's what buyers think of it, because they're the ones that can go file suit in California and have a process server come to see me in Charlotte. And the next thing I know, I'm on the short end of a lawsuit 3,000 miles away to be the test case in this.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something that, frankly, it has surprised me that it has not gotten more traction in the media, either within the trade or outside, as this deadline looms. And I think Kara's exactly right. The California show is going to be the first sense we get of just how this begins to play out for out-of-state dealers thinking about going there.
I suffer from political identity syndrome. I think they're all terrible, but you know, this is going to be a thing where the law is going to be passed, and I'm sure somebody is going to get the assignment to go to the book fair and, you know, police it and see what happens. You're not on for a while, you know, so watched. I think it's a kind of Big Brother scary situation. You know, the fact that Alex, and we all, you know that he's got a tremendous reputation. He wrote a thing on the Paris Book Fair. I thought I was there when I read it. You know, if he is concerned, I think everybody's going to be concerned. Well, let me say this. Time for the third degree.
Oh.
First, let me remind you, this is the Rare Book Cafe, and we are brought to you weekly by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. As a reader of old-time detective novels knows, that's when police used to give criminals who weren't talking the third degree. Our version is less violent, but maybe just as painful. Okay, our victim guest today is Karen Accettola. Are you ready for us to give you the third degree?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
All right. This is a very serious question, and it may be used against you in a court of law for future prosecution. But was there ever a book that you did not return to a friend or a library?
He looks guilty to me.
I'm definitely guilty. I'm a guilty person. I'm scatterbrained, so I'm sure. But if I did, I made amends.
Okay. Oh Lord. Okay.
Exactly.
What's
Which one absolves me? I don't know, but yeah.
What's your favorite guilty pleasure kind of book? The kind you read when nobody's looking, or when you hide behind a more respectable dust jacket?
Right. Exactly. fiction. I kind of apologize for fiction. I'm like, sorry, this isn't a reference book. I'm just reading, you know, a Hungarian translation of a great novel.
Okay, I hide that too. What's the most expensive book you've ever touched or seen?
Seen? Oh,
Seen?
yeah. I mean, something on the floor of New York, but I would say touched and turned the pages of and had a lot of time with pretty recently. This year was an association copy of Kelmscott Chaucer at University of Delaware. That was pretty. It was I think Edward Burne-Jones Association copy, and it was in its original chemise, and it's part of the Mark Samuels Lasner collection at UD, and that's pretty lovely. And I think it's the only association copy of that it's technically in private hands because it's not really the university's, it's Mark's. So that would probably be it.
That sounds kind of glorious. What book or books are on your nightstand right now?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll make this short. I just joined a couple book clubs because I realized that I need somebody to say, here, girl, read this book now. Otherwise, you know, so many choices. So right now I actually have Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance on my bedstand. And last week it was Isaac Asimov's short stories, and with hopeful readiness, but not any start or completion, Island by Huxley. And the last book that I read in its entirety, and probably my husband will tease me, the first one in a couple of years that was fiction, was Magda Szabo's The Door, which I highly recommend.
Okay. This one is not on the script. I'm going to impromptu on this one. Did you ever, I confess I have, did you ever damage anything accidentally, knocked over a drink, something?
In my own booth or in someone else's?
Anywhere. Anywhere.
I mean, I definitely messed up my own stuff. Yeah, I have never messed anyone else's stuff up, but I have definitely, well, I mean, I've accidentally locked keys in Victorian cases. I don't think that counts. Then we have to break the lock. But that's what I have definitely murdered a book inadvertently. So it was manslaughter, or womanslaughter, because I've done the whole split on the board to the hinge because it fell to its death. That's sad.
Yeah. That's why I never take a book open out of somebody's hand. Too many front covers have appeared detached.
Right,
and,
exactly.
And finally, our salute to one of our favorite interviewers, James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio.
Oh, yes.
And it was one of his most popular questions.
If heaven exists?
Your favorite curse word.
Oh.
And we're on table so you can say it. And did you ever read it in a book?
I can say it, or no, I shouldn't say it. Is that what you're saying?
It's up to you. We no fines, no big brother.
Right. Well, I definitely say fucking hell a lot, and I have a lot of them. I mean, I curse like a sailorette.
Yes, she does.
It's healthy. Good for you. Let it out.
Kara, I want to thank you for being a good sport, and I'll give you a secret curse word. It's called ESAD. Eat shit and die. That's my favorite one because nobody knows what you're saying to them. And on that note, I am going to introduce my lovely wife, Edie, who is a miniature book collector, and this is now going to be Edie's Miniature Book Corner, and I'll see you all in a few.
Well, thank you, Steve. While Edie is getting ready here, I was going to talk about something else, but since we were talking about curse words, something occurred to me. In the Japanese language, before World War II, before the American Occupation Army showed up, there was absolutely no curse words, none of the F word, none of the words would describe physical functions, that was it, except for one word. It was baka, B-A-K-A, which meant fool. And in the old days, if you called somebody baka, especially samurai, you were probably going to lose your head. I mean, it was fighting words, challenge for a duel. It was such an insult because it didn't mean the fool of the English language. It meant your life was a fool, you're immoral, there was only one word you could say that was bad enough in an entire culture. So, Edie, with that, are you ready to go?
I certainly am, and thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thanks. I'm going to be telling you a story today, and then I'll be showing you some miniature books. The Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is not only a place to buy and sell books, but you meet wonderful people. Now, usually while Stephen is setting up our booth, I'm running around to everybody else setting up their booth saying, do you have any miniature books? Do you have any miniature books? Do you have any miniature books? And a few years ago, in the lobby of the Coliseum, and the Coliseum itself is such a magnificent home for the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, there was a gentleman sitting at the table with the bibliophiles where people who buy their tickets can bag to leave or leave books as they buy them or. And this gentleman was Don Brady. Now, Don Brady handed me his business card. Now, that's his business card, and this is it compared to ours. Don Brady manufactured, published miniature books. And he had said to me, I didn't know him, and he said to me, Edie, I have some miniature books you might like to see. How about if I bring some by tomorrow? That'll be wonderful. And I said, you'll find me in our booth, Alcove 6. And the next day he came in with an attaché case. And he opened up this attaché case, and there I saw rows of his miniature books. And I picked up a couple of them, and I said, oh, I love these. And he said, well, I publish them. And I said, I want one of each if the price is right. And we started to laugh, and we started to talk about his miniature books. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but Don was not well. And do you and Steve go home right after the show? And I said, no, we always come in a day or two early, and we always leave a day or two afterwards to relax and combine it with a little holiday. So the next day, Monday, after the show, we went up to his home. We were privileged to go to his home in Newport Richey. And in Newport Richey, we saw where he manufactured his little miniature books. It's the first time that I saw them. And I found out that he had worked for the government as a publisher. Anyhow, one thing led to another, and Stephen and I wound up buying his entire inventory that was left and his books on printing, which Stephen has since sold. But my miniature books I did not sell. Now, when you go into a show or you're going to sell books, you're going with boxes and boxes and boxes. This is a little carrier of duplicates of 9 of Don Brady books that I am finally starting to sell my duplicates. Now, Don would put out a paper like this, if you can see it, on every one of the miniature books that he made. And he would give a description of the book, a description of the story, and a little history of why he decided to publish that one. This is one of them. It's The Will of Charles Lansbury. And most of his books are signed and limited and numbered in the back. And so I was just so privileged to meet him. We were so privileged to meet his wife, his lovely wife, and to get to see how a miniature book is made. So with a trip to the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, not only do you buy and sell but you can meet wonderful people like me and Steve and Thorne and Al and Lindsay and Don Brady, who has since passed, unfortunately. So that is my story for today. This opportunity to wish everybody a healthy, happy, wonderful Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year, Kwanzaa. And I wish you all what I wish for myself. You can't do any better than that. So that's the end of my little miniature book story this week. And perhaps another time I will show you one of his other books like The Robin or something like that. Thank you and have a great holiday.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you, Edie. While we're waiting for Steve to set back up, I want to. People always come into my bookstore and they say, "What?" They look. I have about 600, and I want many thousands more reference books. But people always ask me, "Okay, I'm getting started in the book business. Give me a book. Give me a website to go to." And I always tell people that probably the easiest and the best book is something called John Carter's ABCs for Book Collecting. A very simple book, a very small book, but what a lot of people aren't aware of. But the 9th edition has just come out, and I believe it's, I'm just looking here, it's around $20, $25. The 9th edition is the newest version. It's been out maybe a couple of months now. And after, 50, 60 years in print something, they made a kind of a large change here. And the change is, it is now illustrated. For those of you that don't like literature, it means it's got pictures now, folks, which actually makes it really a little more helpful. So, Steve, what have you got for us now?
I was just looking to my left and right. Somewhere I've got a run of the first to the third or fourth edition of that. It's books on book collecting. It's just, what can you say? We're magnetically attracted to them. And the fact that that's illustrated now, yeah, I totally agree with you that it might add on. The learning process today is so different. I mean, I know I'm only allowed to say this a few more times about the A.B. Bookman's Weekly, but when you read the A.B. Bookman's Weekly, you had a different learning process than you did today. The only substitute, now that there's the book schools, is not much. There's not much that you can read on a weekly basis that came out in the format it did. I kind of mourn the loss of that magazine. I kind of wish Jake had kept up with it all. And I am, wow, okay. I just read a couple of notes here.
Can I say something about a new reference book that I think is one of the newest to come out in the last couple weeks that I don't have yet, but I think everyone should probably get? It is Sid Berger. His new book is a glossary for book collectors, booksellers, librarians, and others. And it's supposed to be fabulous.
Okay, I have to add on to that a little bit. And I'm pretty sure it's the same book. It is available at various price points, and it's a big puppy.
It is a big puppy, yeah. Do you have it?
At the risk of being thrown out of the various associations I'm a member of, I broke down, and I did this for a reason. For $99, rather than $1.30 or $1.50 or something, yeah. I bought an ebook version of it. And the reason I did so, I have it on my iPad, which I can take to shows.
Exactly.
What I did is on Amazon. We know you can all do this. You can go, you get a little, you can download a 10-page clip of it just for fun. And I read through it, and it was partially the introduction, and that was the first part of the letter A. And I was just showing, talk about Mr. Carter's, and they even admit that they started from the Carter ABC book. And this gentleman, I believe, was a professor at Iowa. He was in the business. He's been working on this book for, I'm pretty sure it has to be the same guy, about 30 years working on this book. It is absolutely fantastic. It is much more in depth. It's probably 300 or 400 pages. I really don't know. Like I said, I got the ebook. And
1,300 keywords, 1,300 key terms. Yeah.
And one of my goals, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to say it publicly before I get, and I have till April, to our book fair. I want to read through that thing. I have read through the ABC of Carter, marked it all up and all that. And I think this is this is kind of like a master's level program on the Carter's ABCs. And he's done a fantastic job. I've never met him or know almost nothing about the gentleman outside the reputation I read in his bio, and it is fantastic. I think that is the new reference book for the business, as far as I'm concerned. It's beautiful.
I think that's mandatory reading. I agree with you that I want to get the book and read it from cover from A to Z, so to speak. It's kind of like when the Aherns or Bradleys came out. I used to at least read it from cover to cover, you know, just to see what was going on. Well, it is now time for Professor Donnelley to put on his mortarboard cap, and I think you are going to be talking about machine-made versus handmade books today.
Yeah, what I was thinking about doing, and we're going to be doing a lot of history courses, like Cynthia and Kara and myself. I go to the Rare Book School and I take a lot of courses. But one of the ones I took recently, I was honored. There's a gentleman named Eric who runs the Grolier Club, and he also teaches at the Rare Book School. The Rare Book School doesn't have any full-time faculty that I know of anyway. They're specialists in their field and they come from somewhere else. And he teaches a course, so I'm happy to have here the syllabus for, nothing too impressive, but what it is the printed book in the West since 1800. And one of the first things he talks about in his class is where are we gonna break up books? You know, books started roughly with Gutenberg, roughly 1450. We've all seen the pictures of the press. Mr. Gutenberg with his little type invention, which is a great thing. We have that. And that went on for about 250 years or so. There really was not much more going on in the printing industry, with the exception of when Mr. Gutenberg invented a press. It was a wooden press, but he didn't really invent the printing press. He used it, I understand it was an oil processing press. He was a goldsmith, so he came up with the idea of type. And he added, you know, the Chinese had block printing for a long time. The Koreans also had. So he was using a wooden press. About 100 and something years later, they came up with a metal press, which just quite simply added a lot more pressure ability to the hand press. You could come up with clearer type. I guess it really was a big help for doing colored illustrations, all that. But effectively, for almost 3 centuries, what Mr. Gutenberg, if he'd come back a couple hundred years later, he could have put on his printer's apron and gone to work and wouldn't have been too concerned about the whole thing. But what did happen was somewhere around 1800 as a cutoff. I like to use 1860 because that's when my family business started, and we were definitely a commercial printer. It went from the letterpress, where you had one man, actually a lot of times women, because for some reason the early printing days, a lot of women inherited the printing press after their husband passes away. That's fairly common for some of the early presses. And you would have 2 people, possibly 3, one cranking onto the bit, one changing the paper, perhaps a third person moving the page or the leaf away. You were just limited, you know, depending on how fast you got going. You could produce a certain number of leaves of books a day, you know, how many hours it was working, but it was an expensive and a slow process. And all of a sudden, the Industrial Revolution hit. Steam engines, steam power. We all remember with Mr. Watt, the steam engine, the early electrical engines. And before that, you even had water-powered, which you may have seen where some of the old granaries and stuff were next to a river, and they had these belts that came out. Well, they started figuring out that why don't we start putting up some kind of power to this printing press. And Eric does a much better job than myself, but there were a fair number of inventors that kept going, trying to make it work. There's some really almost Rube Goldberg kind of inventions that are basically a mechanically way of cranking it up and down. But eventually they came up with the idea. There's numerous machines, but they pretty much came up to what's pretty useful today, was the idea of offset presses, where it's a roller, and rather than going up and down situation, you can really get that speed going. I think many of you have probably either been to a newspaper or seen a newspaper press in some television show or a movie, and you can barely see the paper coming out of the end of this thing. And so the presses, New York Times, or one of the few remaining London or New York newspapers, I believe their morning edition is in the millions of copies. which you multiply millions of copies times what's the New York Times, a couple hundred pages every day. My math is kind of escaping me right now, but that is cranked out over an 8-year period, an 8-hour period at the end of the night. So going from the hand press era to the machine press, I'm not even talking about the way you can use photographs to typeset and all of these kind of things. What we have going here is just a huge increase in the number of impressions, the number of copies that can come out. I personally like to use a cutoff that Eric says is a little late, but it works for me, of 1860, because that's, as I said, my family got going in the printing business, and it also helps me eliminate the concept of Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, which there's a lot better people out there, so I don't have to deal with them. But it's just kind of fascinating to watch all the machines that get coming out towards the very end of, but the middle of the last century. They started having things called monotype and linotype machines that took the type, and then the linotype actually added all the types into a system like this. These are a bunch of letters put together. And what I found fascinating is one of the times I was at the Rare Book School, there is a professor there that still has both a linotype machine, a monotype machine. There is a gentleman who still repairs the things. So a lot of these, even the earlier stuff, is still out there being repaired. You have a resurgence coming back from England against the industrialization. Kelmscott Press comes to mind. A lot of other private presses now. You can still buy a very nice, there's various manufacturers, there's a Allow for sale, you get them on eBay. I looked at one that was a complete set for under $1,000. A little small letter hand press. You can put on your desktop and you can print your own book. You can print your own wedding invitations, whatever. More and more people still there, people still making handmade paper. You can still make handmade printing. It still works quite well, but for commercial printing, those days are sadly gone. And to me, I kind of miss a bit of the artistry, the humanness. It sounds a little silly. The mistakes that were made. I love, I've got books I have bound that are missing pages, that are missing, the typography is upside down, whatever. At our last book fair, I bought a copy of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that the title page was bound in upside down. It makes it kind of fun. That was a commercial mistake from a bindery, but I love some of the old mistakes. So, Steve, I think you have some other things for us to go to, so I will continue this another day.
Well, we were just having a little bilingualism there. I am looking at, okay.
I was wondering what was kept coming up. I was seeing that. I was trying to figure out what was going on there.
Well, today Lindsay brought me back to Tamament being the entertainment director, and Kara and Cynthia were talking in Spanish, so I was an entertainment director there too. It was, what I didn't know was there was some kind of big incunabula collection in Venezuela when I was down there, but it was supposed to be some Rockefeller collection. I wonder if it's even still there. So I asked, do we have any questions from the audience? Did anybody send us something that I might have missed, or one of us got and the other didn't, on questions for books or anything else that's going on? And I am taking the silence as no. So I want to thank everybody for being with us. Remember that the book fair is April 21st through 23rd in St. Petersburg at the Coliseum. We hope everybody will join us there. It's 120 book dealers from around the country and around the world, and it definitely is book selling pleasure. Kara, Cynthia, thank you for being with us. That's all the time we have for today. Pleasure. We'll be taking the next 2 Saturdays off for Christmas and New Year's. Invite you to post, comment, talk to us, keep in touch with us, and so on. You can also email us questions and comments and send us photos of your book treasures at rarebookcafe@gmail.com. On the 24th, we are rerunning on Bucks on the Bookshelf, the show with Werner Samrix Heinrichs. I think I said it right. I am hoping, as we all are, that he's recovering and doing better. I'm not sure what we're doing on the air the 31st. Show will not, we will be running reruns between now and the 31st. And Alan, would you come in and just tell us when the next show is?